When I was in the 3rd grade, my teacher wrote the word talkative on my report card. Now, I knew this wasn't a good thing because it was listed in the areas for improvement section. Talkative. My 8-year-old brain pondered the word. Why exactly am I supposed to fix that? Next came high school, where I found myself in an all-girls school. There, it was cool to be smart, at least until about 2:30 on Friday. Girls weren't trying to get dates, they were trying to get perfect grades. And in this environment, that talkative side of me could flourish, both in speech and on the page. Next came university, and alongside the presence of the opposite sex, I was suddenly desperate to avoid being that girl in the class, the one that was always raising her hand because she always did the reading. It was the first time I felt like the person I was, talkative, analytical, curious, always hungry for more information, was at odds with what would make me likable. It was the first time I considered shrinking. But thankfully, back then, I found solace. I found it in the Student Media Center. There, every Sunday, myself and my fellow editors would gather, and while other students were nursing hangovers, we would hash out ideas for the next edition of the paper. There, raising my hand with yet another idea for an article or an op-ed wasn't annoying, but an asset. And it was in that space that I began to care more about my ideas than what people thought of me. Now, I'd love to tell you that the story ends there, that I transcended the tension between being me and being likable and kicked patriarchy to the curb forever. But as anyone who has ever left the cozy confines of university to pursue their dreams in the real world might tell you, reality kind of sucks. I was not yet aware that my gender would be a lens through which people assessed my work. But the realization came quickly. It came when one male editor expressed surprise that someone like me would be capable of writing words he deemed publishable. It came when people asked me how much of the work I got was based on how I look. The answer is none, because I work on the internet. It came when people suggested I must sleep with editors to get assignments. It came when I told innumerable people I was a writer, and they responded by asking what fashion magazines I write for. I was working so hard to be taken seriously, but these comments, once again, made me consider shrinking. Would my work ever be judged outside of the context of my gender, my appearance, my femaleness? So here we are, present tense, and I'm happy to say that I'm a person who makes a living mostly based on the words and ideas in her head. And I think the main way I've achieved that is by turning in to the adult version of a 3rd grade girl who just won't shut up. A mouthy woman. Now, if that phrase gives you pause, it's because it's supposed to. Mouthy woman is a reappropriation of a term that I think people have said about me behind my back. It's how I feel when I read the nasty internet comments or Twitter mentions on the feminist articles I write. It's how I feel when I drop the word patriarchy into otherwise low-key dinner conversation. It's how I feel when I have to correct a man more than twice my age on his assumptions of the experience of my gender. These are the times when the person I am and the person that society expects me to be seem at odds. The upside, of course, to being a mouthy woman in media is that you have ideas, and if you work hard, you can get paid to write them down. In fact, I feel immensely privileged to have come of age as a journalist in a time when feminist media is flourishing online. There are no shortage of women to look up to, mouthy heroines like Lindy West, Anne Friedman, Jessica Valenti, Caitlin Moran, Roxane Gay, Lena Dunham, the list goes on. These women talk like women talk, and they do it in settings where that can be kind of subversive. like the front page of a newspaper. They talk about periods in national publications. They demonstrate that it is entirely possible to be interested in the Kardashians and complex geopolitical trends at the same time. But most of all, they create work that's so bold, entertaining, wise, or funny that it can't be relegated to the pink ghetto of women's lifestyle media, where women's work so often lands. So why is this heroic? Because as I've learned from experience, being a mouthy woman in media is also a rather terrifying thing to be. The same women I've modeled my career after wake up to death threats, rape threats, persistent online sexual harassment, and internet trolling at a rate which studies show is wildly disproportionate to that which men receive, men who do the same work. When The Guardian analyzed its comment section recently, it found that 8 of the 10 regular contributors whose articles received the most abusive comments were women. And the 10 regular contributors whose articles received the least, all men. Now, here is a rather unflinching portrait of what Google's algorithm thinks of the term mouthy woman. I'm not kidding, that's the first page if you Google it. I did not scroll. But I think author and columnist Lindy West said it best when she said, being insulted and threatened online is part of my job. So why does this happen? I have a hunch. It's because these women are mouthy. They do not ascribe to the singular definition of female likability that has been outlined for millennia. They have the audacity to create work that directly affronts people who have historically had power. And that is exactly why we need more of them. Now, just in case you thought this was just about what mouthy women say, it's not. It's also about how we say it. Vocal fry, upspeak, the words like, I mean, I feel. These linguistic trends are associated with being less intelligent and sophisticated because they're more likely to be used by females. And this is despite the fact that some linguists credit the inventors of these trends, which happen to be adolescent girls, as being innovators in modern speech and conveying more emotion and meaning in what they say. Now, I think my favorite example of this is a letter sent to This American Life, a popular radio show in the US, which many of you have probably heard of. The commenter writes, listen, I know there's pressure to hire females, particularly young females just out of college. And besides, they're likely to work for less money. But do you have to choose the most irritating voices in the English-speaking world? I mean, are you forced to? I like this because it fits so much misogyny into so few words, but also because it inadvertently captures what it's like what it can feel like to be a young woman working in media. Now, it's easy to get a sense of what Professor Mary Beard meant when she said, women, even when they are not silenced, still have to pay a very high price for being heard. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, before I get to that, I want to address the men in the room. I know that men can feel very powerless amidst all this feminism talk. I have male friends who say they're tired of hearing everything in the world be blamed on white men in suits. So take solace first in knowing that we as women are far more tired of living it. And you can help. You can help, in some cases, by being more mouthy as well. Be mouthy when a colleague interrupts a female speaker for the 6th time in a meeting. Be mouthy when your friends rate a woman's body on a numerical scale as if she's not a human. Be mouthy when your boss assembles a speaker panel that's made up solely of men. And crucially, don't be mouthy when a woman tries to tell you what it's like to be a woman. That is one area where we do not need your help. And finally, an invitation to the women in this room and to women everywhere. I often get feedback from friends, internet followers, readers who say, "I'm so glad you said that. It's so true. I think that all the time." I want to turn around to them and say, "Thank you, but don't just think it. Say it too." I really do realize that it's a huge privilege to be mouthy. There are women all over the world who would be punished, even raped, killed, disowned by their families for saying the things that I say every day. I also realize that even from a place of privilege, it's not always practical to be mouthy. But when we can, we must. We must not only reclaim mouthy, but normalize it as well. The more we do that, the more we won't have to choose between being silent or being harassed for expressing ourselves on the internet. The more that girls who know all the answers will also be the girls that boys want to date. And the more that future 8-year-old girls won't be described as talkative, but as engaged. In short, don't shrink. Be mouthy instead. Thank you.